So thank you all for having me. I'm really excited about being here and sharing this. I'm something that I'm really passionate about because this is really a tragic event that's going on across the United States. It's just been going on as far as the opioid epidemic. So before we get into it, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me and about us and that kind of a thing. So that's my boy. He's my oldest, and we worked with the St. Louis Rams organization. So we worked with the Rams organization before they moved, and I worked with the Rams cheerleaders. And one of the cool things is that I got to go on the field for that a lot of times. So my first time coming out there, I have my boy with me, and we're coming through the corridor, and we're walking out onto the field, and there's these cheerleaders standing there, and they're like, "Oh, Dr. Vidan, is this your boy?" And we're talking and everything and chit-chatting. "Oh, let's take a picture." So we take this picture. And then you can see over here, that's the field right there, right? So I said, "Come on, son, let's go do manly things. Let's watch these players run their routes," and like we're doing this thing, and I'm holding my boy, and I'm looking, and it's like from here to here, and the players are running their routes and doing their drills and doing the whole thing. And I was just like, man, this is going to be a memory. Like, this will be something he's going to remember forever. And I was like, it was one of those moments where you're like, okay, this is going to be good, and he's going to remember this forever. And I'm looking at him, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at the players, and he's looking at me, and he's getting ready to speak, and I can just tell right there, like, he's feeling it too. Like, he's feeling this is going to be a moment too, right? And so he looks at me, and he goes, "Dad," and I go, "Yeah, son," and he goes, "Can we go back and talk to those cheerleaders again?" I was like, "Take it easy there, buddy. Take it easy," right? So like we were talking about, I worked with the St. Louis Cardinals whenever we won the World Series. So I was the official, like I was one of the team providers, right? So I was one of the team physicians for the St. Louis Cardinals. And it was a great organization, great people to work with, and it was a lot of fun. Take care of those guys and everything. So I'm also on the news, so I say all this stuff not to be like pats on the back, just to kind of let you know, like we just do things different in our office, and we get to help a lot of people, and I just kind of like to mention that. So we're on the news. I've been on the news over 200 times, nationally, internationally, and I've gotten to travel all around speaking, and I love to speak, so I was truly honored to be here, so thank you for having me here, because I truly appreciate it. I've been to China a couple of times talking about health and wellness and chiropractic and what it is that we do. So specifically, I'm a chiropractor, and I show people how it is that they can help themselves with not having to be dependent upon drugs and surgery and everything else, right? We're trying to give other people other options. So whenever I was over in China, this was 18 months ago. I just got back from China a couple of weeks ago. In fact, we were talking whenever I was in China, right? And so I was driving along, and have you ever had one of those moments where you're just kind of like, there is no way what I'm seeing is actually what I'm seeing, right? So I'm driving along, and I'm in a city of about 7 million, and as we're driving, we're leaving a lunch meeting, and everybody there, like, nobody speaks English, so I've got a translator, right? I've got my translator, I've got my handler, the one that makes sure I get everywhere and all this stuff and handles everything, and then the driver. We're driving along, we're leaving this lunch meeting, and as I'm driving, I'm just staring out the window, your eyes are starting to glaze, like that whole thing, and I look, and when I look, I see a bus, and on this bus, I see my mug on the side of this bus. So I start hitting my interpreter, and I was like, hey, what's that? And she starts talking to the handler, and the handler starts talking to the driver, and they're all talking and everything, and I don't know what anybody's saying. And they go, "Oh, that's a picture of you on a bus." I was like, "Yes, I can see that. That is a picture of me on the bus. Why is there a picture of me on the bus?" They go, "Oh, we want to let people know that you were coming here to speak." I was like, "Wow, okay, well, that's pretty cool." I said, "Now listen, next time this bus stops, you've got to stop, and I've got to get a picture of this, because no one will ever believe this, right? Like, you would never believe, yeah, sure, your face was on a picture, on a bus. Sure, makes sense." So we pull him over. Translator and handler get out, they run over, they talk to the driver, and they start talking to him, telling him what's going on and everything else. And they're like, "Yeah, the guy on the side of the bus is here, and he wants to take a picture with the bus. Is that okay?" And the driver says, "Yeah, sure, we've got 1 minute, go ahead and do it." So I stand here, and this is my coolest position I can do. Like, this is me next to a bus. I don't know how you exactly are supposed to do that, but this is me trying to be like, I don't know how to awkwardly not stand here with my picture. And people on the bus start asking the driver what's going on. They're like, "Hey, what's going on? What's happening?" He tells them, so they start coming off the bus to come take pictures with me on the side of the bus. They don't know who I am. They just are like, "Oh, let's take a picture with this guy," right? So now you know a little bit about me. So let's dive into this. Let's get into some of these things because we have 3 objectives that I want to make sure that we address, and we really are going to make sure that we cover these in depth with as much time that we have here, but we're going to make sure we cover a lot of information. So the 3 objectives are these. It's addressing the opioid epidemic today. It's number 1 is understanding the opioid epidemic and the trends that are nationally and locally, because I want to talk about what's going on nationally and what's happening right here in our state. And then knowing what drug companies have done and that they're currently doing in the epidemic, and we're going to talk about that, and it gets bad. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to talk about things that we can do to combat the opioid epidemic today. And I'm going to talk about some specifics within that are really going to bring some things home as far as other options that we have, and that's going to come from a couple different places within that too. So let's get into the first one. Let's get into understanding the opioid epidemic today, and there's national trends and local trends, but let's first get into the local ones first. So the CDC guidelines for opioids, what they said is, they said, look, while Americans represent less than 5% of the world's population, we're consuming 80% of the opioids that are supplied around the world and 99% of the global supply of that hydrocodone as well. So when we think about those things and we consider all that, we have to consider the fact that we should definitely be a nation that has zero pain at all, right? We shouldn't have no problems. There should be anything that's going on with any of that, because if these drugs are the things that fix that and we're consuming all of it, we shouldn't have any of those problems, right? So remember that, because we're going to come back to that as well. So based on the data that's publicly available, all the stuff I'm going to show you is public knowledge. It just takes a lot of digging to find and things like that. And we're going to get into some nitty-gritty things as well. So it talks about this. Look, there's distributors that are out there. So the drug manufacturers, and we have the distributors that pump it out there to all the pharmacies and everybody else, right? They're failing to identify and report these obviously suspicious activities. We're going to talk about what those are and like how blatantly suspicious these things would be. To any one of us looking in there and just kind of seeing the information, we would be like, there's no way someone missed that. Like, how do you miss that kind of information? If you have an ulterior motive, then it's okay to miss that stuff, right? So for example, in '99, the amount of prescription opioids sold was nearly quadrupled, right? So it just went boom, in 1999 it quadrupled, just like that. That should be an indicator of either there's something going on here or things that we're doing as far as the company goes is working, right? Depending on how you want to look at it. In 2010, 254 million people, or millions prescriptions were out for opioids. Basically, that means that every adult could get a prescription around the clock for an entire month. Like they could just keep on getting, like that's how many scripts were out there in that amount of time. So when you think about that, there's a lot of people that were impacted. Now remember when I said there's glaring examples of things that are out there. This is Kermit, West Virginia. Now West Virginia is one of the states that's been the hardest hit with this opioid epidemic. Kermit has a population of 392 people live in Kermit. Yet 9 million opioids were shipped over 2 years to Kermit. This is literally like I looked to try to find a picture of the town. This is the picture of the town. Like that's it. That's the town. They've got 392 people, 9 million opioid pills that are getting shipped over 2 years to that space. Does the math add up there for us? Like that's a glaring example of these are the things that are going on that are just egregious and problems, right? That's scary. The CDC said this, look, the marketing manufacturers, the manufacturers have a campaign that's going on in order to make sure that they're selling more and more of this. So they want to look at it and they say, look, this isn't helping. As in, there's no material health care benefits. There's no benefits that have been brought to any of us. And basically, we have no change in pain that any Americans report. So if we're consuming all the medications, basically in the entire world, we make up less than 5% of the world's population, yet we have no overall change in pain from America that's being reported. We've got a problem there, right? That means we've got a big issue. So the White House is looking into this, and the White House has recently signed a 600-page bill, and what they did was they said, let's look at what West Virginia has done, and we're going to build off of that. And from that, they're going to say, these are things that we can do to start to implement nationally to make sure that we take care of and address this opioid crisis that we're in right now. So this information I'm giving you right here is from the White House. It's from the White House's paper that they put out, basically stating that it's the drug overdoses are the leading cause of injury death in the United States. 175 Americans die every day from a drug overdose, and that's from stats from 2016. 130 of those are from opioids. So 175 is from drug overdose in general. 130, 132 is from opioid. And then this one is one that I find really heartbreaking because of the fact that, look, when people are prescribed opioids, and you'll see the chance of being prescribed that, and then all of a sudden, I hate this, but this is how they termed it. They said people who abuse prescription opioids. I have a hard time with this, but I wanted to be straight because this is coming straight from the CDC. Basically, they're looking at it and going, these people are abusing the opioids, so it's almost like it's their fault, right? Like they're taking it, they're abusing it. A lot of times it's not that, it's that they've just gotten addicted. And I'll show you the stats on that addiction, and it's horrible. But the problem is that they get hooked on the opioids, and then all of a sudden it becomes too costly for them to do that, or they get cut off, or it just becomes something that becomes a bigger issue, and then they're 40 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. In fact, when we start to look at that, usually about nearly 80% of Americans using heroin over the past year, they reported misusing prescription opioids first. So they started on opioids, and then they transferred on to heroin because of the fact that they have their own reasons, right? It's like, I can't afford it anymore, I got cut off, whatever it is, and these are the things that are going on. I need a bigger fix, a bigger high. So, but at the same time, they were prescribed the right pill at the right time because they had pain, right? And then they get addicted, and then it moves on to heroin. Same thing here, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, that they found that, look, these prescriptions like the opioid pain medications like Oxycontin, Vicodin, they have similar effects just like heroin. So it's an easy transition for someone that's already addicted to something like this, that's an opioid, a pain prescription, then they switch over to something like heroin. And so it's an open door for them to move to. But let's look at stats here. Like I want to bring that, so that's kind of on a national look. Let's bring it right here. Let's bring it to what we're looking at here for Louisiana. So in 2012, they did an audit and they found that Louisiana prescribed 118 scripts for 100 people. For every 100 people, we're prescribing 118 times. Does that seem right? Like there's something wrong with that, right? So when we see that many pills, the number of prescriptions per 100 people, this is from the Center of Disease Control, this is coming straight from them. It shows all these numbers, and that's in 2012. Now, this is more recent. This is, and I know you probably can't see that back there, this is from Louisiana, it's age adjusted, looking at overdose deaths involving prescription opioids, and then the opioid prescription rate as well, and this is coming from the CDC. So this is more recent. And so basically what it shows us is in that 2012 that we were looking at, that's that 118 that we just saw. And then now what we're getting in 2017, we're at 89.5. So the good news is that those prescriptions are going down. As in the number of prescriptions that we're prescribing here in Louisiana, it's going down, which is great to see. That means like things like this and the education process that goes on and people understanding is helping. We just have to make sure that we do more of it because the national average is something like 53%. So we still have a lot of work to do, but still at the same time it's going down. Here's the bad news. The bad news is that the number of deaths has gone up. In that same period of time since 2012 to now, we've gone up, and we've gone up threefold to 3.6. So when we start looking at that, we've got to start looking at some other things. So here it is, right? So Louisiana providers wrote 89.5 opioid scripts compared to 58.7. That's the national. Right? That's the average that we usually see. So it was among top five in the United States right here. Right? So for that year, we were in the top 5 for the number that we were doing out right here in Louisiana. And it was the lowest rate since the data became available in 2006 because we're going down from there, which is good. We just have more work to do. And then that age-adjusted rate, that looks at this from, the trend is that we're going up. We went from 1.5 in 2011 to 3.6 deaths per 100,000 people in 2017. So when we start to look at that, we start to go, okay, more people are dying because of it, but less people are getting the scripts. So hopefully on the tail end of it, we should start seeing those numbers start to even out and we start to see everything start to go down from there. And that's really the ultimate goal within that, is have fewer and fewer of this. Because this is what we're seeing as far as the trends go. Again, this is right here in Louisiana. We're looking at those same numbers, right? So back from 2006 and how we got to here. So even synthetic, prescribed opioids, what we see as far as heroin goes, I mean, we've got a lot of people, a lot of families that they're being affected. And one of the worst ones is, that I look at with this as well, is this right here, right? Like the number of kids that are being born now that are addicted to heroin. Like the number of kids that are being addicted every 25 minutes. That's a lot of babies that are being born with this opioid withdrawal problem. right? So back in the 80s, we had crack as being the problem. Now it's moving on to opioids. And so we're just changing. And we've got 1.5 billion in healthcare that we see the charges every single year. So whenever we look at all these things, we've got to make a lot of different changes when there. But there is a glimmer of hope within that. So this will not be all downer stuff. I promise there will be here's the positive side of this as well. That the glimmer of hope is that, look, there are things that are happening, and I hate to even find this as the glimmer of hope within this when we look at the kids that are here. Like we're looking at, misuse from kids. We're looking at 8th graders. That we've got to decrease by 51%. Great, but why the heck is an 8th grader getting their hands on opioids, right? 67% of 10th graders and 74% of 12th graders, it's going down, right? So we're seeing more and more of those kids getting less and less opioids that are getting addicted to it. But whenever we see this too, we're seeing this compared to more than 54% in 2010. So if we're seeing 35.8% for those 12th graders, they're getting their hands on these opioids. That's why there was all these campaigns by moms groups that was hide your opioids. You don't want your kids to be addicted? Hide them. Hide your pills. We would see them all over. Whenever you would travel places, you would just see this stuff all over. And the idea was, if you're going to be taking the opioids and you don't want your kid to be addicted, they're highly susceptible to being addicted, hide them. Now, I don't know if parents are doing a better job hiding it or there's fewer prescriptions that are going to kids for sports injuries, because that's a big problem too. Because there's a huge market for that, and we'll talk about that as well. Because we've got to know, what are these drug companies doing? So the second objective is this, is that we've got to know what the drug companies have done and are doing within this epidemic. What is it that they've strategically done? Because it's been very strategic. And Pfizer actually is one of the ones that they're actually small in the market. But I wanted to show you even a small one that's in the market, what they're doing. And basically they looked at it, and this is again from information that's just out there, that they don't sell many opioids just in general. But what they do is that their marketing campaign has been so aggressive that they're just taking over with so many of these things. And really the worst one is this guy right here, is Purdue. Purdue is huge. They are the ones that actually came up with Oxy. And so when they came up with it, and they originally came up with it, it was really for this. It was for cancer. It was for people that are in late-stage cancer, and it was to help them through the pain, the immense, horrible pain that they were in. It was just something to help them, or even help them with the transition period that they were in. And that, to me, I look at that and I go, man, there's a good place for this. But they started doing this. They started doing it for low back pain. They started doing it for knee pain. They started prescribing it for headaches and dental procedures and fibromyalgia and sports injuries, even for kids. They started opening up for kids as young as 11 years old, and they're prescribing these types of things. Surgeries whenever they're in post-op. So these health experts, they basically went in and they explained. They said, look, let's look at the review. So they reviewed all this, and they reviewed the opioid companies, and they said, they exaggerated the benefits. So they overpromised on all the benefits that they could have. They underpromised on what it is as far as how safe it was. And then what they did is they set up these advocacy groups that they supported. So these sham groups, and I'll show you that here too, to educate us, to educate our families, to educate our providers, to educate everybody as far as, look, the widespread use of opioids so that they could sell more product. That's really what it was. It was just to sell more, because they use some things. Because when you think about it, when you think about how big of a campaign this kind of a thing would be, you've got to have some type of substantial basis, right? When you think about the fact of how is it that they could get away with, how is it that any company could get away with this and have that much going on? So what they did was they started these groups. And what they did was they started saying, well, we're going to write some articles to put things in. So a lot of the articles that you'll see will use this right here as their founding, as one of their sources that they're using. So as one of their sources, they're using this. This is actually, if you're conniving, this is a smart way to do it. It is. You got it. Also, it's just a letter to the editor. It's just a letter to the editor. And they put it in a very prestigious magazine or a prestigious journal. So they put it in this journal, and then every time they would cite the fact that in this journal, there was this, that found that they went back and they looked at these narcotic addiction. They looked at all of them. They said, hey, look, these people prescribe narcotics. We looked at nearly 40,000 cases, and there was nearly 12,000 patients that received at least one of the narcotics, and they went through the whole process and they did the whole thing and everything, and they said, look, we didn't really see anybody that was addicted. No one that was addicted to this. Isn't that kind of that's an amazing thing to say? You looked at 40,000 people and you didn't find anybody really that was addicted? Like there's some shady stuff going on there. But no one could find this. Again, because it wasn't actually written in an actual peer-reviewed journal or anything else. It was just a letter to an editor. But everybody started using it as a way to then say, no, that was done. And based off of that there, which was in that research article, that was in this peer-reviewed journal, that's what we're using as our stats. Conniving and smart, right? Can you see how they're backdooring that and how they're using this type of thing? So then it opened up the floodgates. So then they started going, oh, okay, listen, we're not going to do this for cancer anymore. We're going to do this for everything. We're going to start using it for everybody. You have some pain? You don't have time for pain. You don't have time for any pain. So what you need to do is you need to take this. You need to take this pain reliever, right? This opioid, Ultraset. Pain doesn't fit into their schedule. So they started heavily marketing, and they started really pushing it. And they started pushing it for everything, from headaches and IBS and shoulder pain, pins and needles, hand numb, leg numb, whatever it is, radiating pain. Anything that you could imagine that was pain, they started pushing and pushing and pushing within that. And so this is where we ended up, right? So Percocet, Percodan, they said, look, we're distributing this patient education publication. They said that basically talks about the withdrawal symptoms and increased tolerance to opioids are not the same as addiction. They said, look, just because you have these things, just because you have withdrawal symptoms and you have an increased tolerance, that's not the same as addiction. That is not. See, addiction is the problem. Addiction, that's for people that have unbearable emotional problems. And I don't know too many people that are like, yep, that's me. Unbearable emotional problems. I probably should not take these pain pills, right? So most people are going to look at this and go, well, that's obviously not me, so I will not get addicted to these pain pills. Everybody with me on that? You see just the conniving and how they're just moving through this and using all of this to put guilt and shame on anybody that gets addicted to it. And so whenever you're in that much pain, because we see it all the time in our office, in our practice, and in talking with people, when you're in that much pain, you're just looking for answers. So you're looking anywhere. So this is some of the education material that they put out, that they just talked about. They said, look, they're putting out education material to help more people, to educate the public on why it is that they would want to take these opioids and what it is that's going to be beneficial to them. So this is the American Pain Foundation. Seems legit, right? It's American, it's pain, it's foundation. Sounds good, right? These are all the organizations, right? These are all the organizations that are represented in getting this material out there. All of them. Look at this. And if you can't read it, I'm just going to make sure I tell you. So American Academy of Pain Management, American Academy of Pain Medicine, American Pain Society, American Holistic Nursing Association. We all trust nurses, so it's easier to say that than trust the doctor, right? So it's like, okay, American Holistic Nursing Association. That's good. American Society for Regional Anesthesiologists, Association of Oncology Social Work. They got all of these on here to say, these people, if you were just the public, you would look at this and you go, man, all these people got together to write this thing and put this together so that I could benefit, and then I could, this is building actual credibility, isn't it? When you read these things and you're out in the public, you're thinking, there's a lot of credibility within that. But this is the part that I actually loved how they wrote this. Because again, it's so conniving. I'm like, I don't even know how you come up with this. Your headspace has to be in such a place to be able to write this and put this down. These are the pharmaceutical companies that contributed. We want to thank for the generous support of unrestricted education grants from the following companies. Unrestricted. Now, if I'm the public and I'm reading that it's an unrestricted education grant, I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty amazing. They didn't hold anything back. They let them just go after it however they want, from the public's perspective. Now, from the legal perspective, it's unrestricted, as in, we're not going to restrict you, as in saying the things that we don't want you to say in here, right? But from the public's perspective, like that's written in a way that you're just like, oh, great. So these guys just gave the money to help fund this project and do all that? No, that has nothing to do with it because this is the ultimate goal, right? The ultimate goal is just get more money. 5 million pain pills to a town of 400. This is another one, right? So they're looking at it from these guys. So the Sackler family. Have you heard of the Sacklers yet? If not, you will. You're going to be hearing more and more about them whenever it comes time for more of this opioid stuff. So for those of you that haven't yet heard about them, I'm glad that I get to be the one to talk to you about it first, right? So the Sackler family, they literally built an empire on pain. So the Sackler family owns 100%. They own Purdue. Purdue is the pharmaceutical company that they own. And so basically they have internal documents that shows just this. That so OxyContin was developed for just what we talked about. It was developed to cure their financial problems. And basically in the 80s, they had this as their main source of revenue. And so what they said is, look, we need to use this to help our cancer patients. It's short term though. When you consider the number of people that have cancer that are in that end area, like that end time, it's very short. Now whenever people take opioids, when do they stop? Like they don't stop, right? Because they're addicted eventually. And so what they said was, look, what we need to do is because of the fact that we're going to have this loss of revenue, we're going to lose so much money because the generic is going to be available, that what we need to do is we need to go ahead and consider doing controlled release opioids so that we can start prescribing them for things other than cancer. And so it was there, man. Like they really did well. They really did so well that they are now considered to be ahead of American dynasties like the Mellons, like you hear Carnegie Mellon, and the Rockefellers. Like that's how rich they're getting off of opioids. And here's the thing. Really, like I'm a business owner, I understand. I would be okay with it if it was helping a lot of people. Like if there was a lot of people that were being helped and it was like, man, they're helping so many people. They deserve to get compensated. Like every one of us, we go to work every day. We do what we do and we do our thing and we expect to have a return on that. We're going to get paid our salary to be able to do our work. It would be okay, except for the fact that they're blatantly lying with everything. And what we're finding is, again, that just because of their marketing efforts, what they're doing is they're just getting rich and it has no material healthcare benefits. All these medications that they're pumping out into our societies, into our communities, into our families, there's no overall change in America in the amount of pain that they're under. Nothing, not at all. In fact, this guy, I'm going to use that term lightly. So this person, Richard Sackler, he's the former president now of Purdue. He's now involved in a lawsuit, which you'll see more and more information out there about that. It's going to come really, it's going to get out there more and more. But this is what he said. We have to hammer the abusers in every way possible. They're the culprits and the problem. They're reckless criminals. He's looking at it as the people that he's selling these opioids to, or he's getting these opioids to, that he's marketing to for headaches, neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, fibromyalgia, all of that, knee pain, all those things. He's saying when they get addicted, they're actually the criminal. Like they're the one, it's their fault. They're bad. They're bad people for being addicted to this. Even though they know that it was addictive, just as addictive as things like heroin, because its components were so closely related to that, right? And this just came out yesterday. So this is yesterday that just happened. And I loved seeing this. Like this is coming. Like there's more coming. There's more to come. There's more good news whenever we're looking at this, that people are going to be held accountable for what it is that's being done. That the executives of these pharmaceutical companies, they were distributing and they were distributor itself. They've been charged with these drug trafficking. They've been charged with a prosecution of first of its kind where the penalty could be a life in prison. So they're looking at it and they're saying, you could actually go to life in prison now because of what you did. They willfully neglected the findings of its own compliance company. So they had a compliance company and they willfully just neglected it for their own personal gain. They said, well, we're making too much money to pay attention to the fact that we sent $2 million or 2 million scripts to a town of 397. We can't pay attention to that. We need to make more money. Because of this. Right? They put profits over people all day long. I mean, they went ninefold in just a short period of time. From 2012 to 2016, they went from $4.7 million to $42 million. You're going to notice that, right? Like, we're going to see those kind of things. And whenever we see that, the crazy thing was about, like, these pharmacies that they were sending the pills to, these pharmacies were ones that other companies had stopped distributing to. So the pharmacies themselves, other companies stopped distributing to, and they said, you know what, the things they're doing, this is throwing red flags. We can't sell to them anymore. We can't ship to them anymore. So we're going to stop. We're going to do the right thing. Good for them, right? This company said, you know what, you can't get the pills you need. We'll send them to you. We'll do it. No problem. In fact, we're going to flood the market in your area. In fact, what they did was they had doctors that had no business prescribing opioids, writing scripts for opioids, to go ahead and make sure that they had more sales. So what it comes down to is this, is what do we do? Like, what's going to combat the opioid epidemic today? Like, what is it that we can do? So we had all that to kind of talk about where we are throughout the process and where we need to go now. Like, where are we now? And there's a couple of different things. So we've got to identify the misuse. We've got to identify the abuse that's going on. And we want to watch for certain symptoms, right? We want to watch for certain things like the increased sensitivity to pain. Isn't that odd, though? That a symptom of taking an opioid is having an increased sensitivity to pain? They find that whenever you are taking opioids and you're taking these pain pills, that you actually get more pain throughout the process. It doesn't negate the pain, but unfortunately what ends up happening is that then what ends up happening is now you're addicted to it. So you're physically addicted to it. So then whenever you don't get your fix, then you actually have more and more pain along with that too. So nausea, vomiting, dry mouth, constipation, like all these things are just, and there's more, but those are just some of the major ones that are out there. Lakeview put this out there and they said, look, these are things to look for whenever we're caught in an addiction cycle. When we're in this cycle, we're addicted, we're in a cycle, we're trying to get out of that cycle, but these are things that we'll end up seeing. Mood swings, right? That we'll see these changes in defense mechanisms. We'll see unreliability. We'll see them being dishonest and lying to friends and family and people that are closest to them. They'll go isolated and withdraw from their loved ones, and then they're going to have difficulty with interpersonal relationships. I mean, those things make sense, but they're things that we should be looking for from our own friends and family too, and people that we know and love, because we want to make sure, like, what's going on. This is one that I think is just, for me, I think this is crazy. This is where, just this, from this report alone, I think that anybody that's even considering taking an opioid, even for anything, any type of pain, you've got to look at this. And everyone should know this, that up to 26% of patients prescribed opioids become addicted after their first prescription. After their first script, up to 26% of them get addicted to those opioids. Like, that's literally, I mean, that's a gamble all day long. And I don't know anybody that's willing to risk their future, their life, everything that they have on the chance that, well, maybe this is going to bring the pain down enough for me to be able to deal with whatever it is, when I've got a 26% chance of being addicted to it. And then this is what they found too in the report, that the demand for the opioids is based on the misconception that it's actually going to take care of things like chronic pain or pain that we're in, because of what we talked about before, right? We talked about the idea that, well, if it's cancer patients that we're helping and taking care of, what about all these other people that have like neck pain, back pain, shoulder pain, headaches, fibromyalgia, all that stuff, which opens up a whole new market for us. Like, that's a whole different deal. And so it's under that misconception that that's what's going on. So the studies showed that those opioids only provide limited improvement, limited change in the pain when compared to other treatment problems or treatment options, and they come with huge risks. Right? And that makes sense to us, but when the White House puts it in there and they start saying these are things that we really need to do, like, it starts perking some ears up. And so they started talking about preventing that misuse and that abuse. Like, what are things that we can do through non-pharmacologic therapies? This is some of what they said, and the list is longer, but I wanted to give you some of the main things that they said. Physical therapy, chiropractic, right? Personally, as a chiropractor, I like the fact that they're saying chiropractic. And in West Virginia, they're making it to where before anybody gets that script, that they have to go see someone, they need to go see someone else first to see what the physical issue might be that's causing the pain that they're having before they get that script, which is a great step in the right direction. And they're narrowing the amount of time that they can get the scripts. So they're saying, look, you're only going to get 6 pills, or you're only going to get 5 pills, and that's it. And that's it, unless we've got this kind of a problem, once we've gone through this procedure and process. Because 25% of opioid scripts are given because of back pain, like 25%. And I'm going to show you a clip here that's coming from an insurance company that talks about what this looks like and how it is that they're going to change things. And it's really like they're coming at the right time for all this. But whenever you consider the fact that there's that many scripts that are being filled for opioids from back pain, when they're finding it doesn't even touch it, like it does not fix the problem at all. That they did a review, right? They did this review of the opioids with back pain, and they said, look, they've got limited, if any, efficacy in correcting that pain or fixing that pain at all, because the pill doesn't fix it. If there's an actual structural problem there, if there's an actual physical problem, there is no pill that you can take to fix that. That makes sense? Like, it's just covering it up. Like, there's no way. It's like, well, my car engine is making noise. You know what I need to do? I need to get earplugs so that I can't hear my car engine making noise anymore, right? I'm just gonna la, 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 right? Like maybe our kids do sometimes, right? Like, no, I don't want to hear, I gotta go to bed, right? Like that kind of thing. It's the same thing. This is all it is. It's just covering it up. The problem is not gone. The problem isn't corrected. And then whenever we see the Institute of Medicine, the FDA, the CDC guidelines, they all say that you should take non-pharmacologic approaches first as the first line of defense in dealing with chronic pain. Anytime you have chronic pain, they're saying, don't go to the pills, go to these other things instead. Because those other things have a much greater chance of actually correcting the problem, right? So instead of blocking our ears, we're going to find out what's going on underneath the hood and figure out how to fix this. And that's what they're suggesting as well, right? Harvard, I love what Harvard said. This is great. So Harvard in 2017, they said, look, whenever you have low back pain, turn to your chiropractor. I was like, yes, I love hearing that. This is great, right? Like, I am on board with you, Harvard. Let's keep saying that, right? So they went on to say that, look, chiropractic can help with things like severe back pain. It can help with things like strains, sprains, herniated or slipped discs. And I love this too, that chiropractors use exercises and they use hand-on spinal adjustments in order to relieve back pain, improve function, and help the body heal itself. Every one of us, our bodies are meant to heal themselves. Right? Like they're meant to heal themselves. We just have to give it the right things or take away the things that are in the way. And unfortunately, the medications, like we're always looking for that magic pill to make that thing to where we don't actually have to do anything about it, right? Like I'm looking for that pill, so I don't have to do anything. I'll just keep taking this pill. Well, they're saying that's not the route to go here. Specifically whenever we're talking about back pain, which affects so many people. And then this, right? So chiropractic patients use 55% less opioids than non-chiropractic patients, which I love seeing. And then this video here, let me give you a background on this. So this is actually coming from a United Healthcare. So this is coming from an insurance company. And this is the report that he's giving here at this National Academics of Science, Engineering, Medicine. And he's basically talking about this is what our plan is. This is what we're seeing as the legitimate numbers. They have actuaries that go through all this stuff and they just look at the numbers. And their job is to crunch numbers and figure out what he's going to show you here. So they're basically unemotionally attached to this. They're looking at it as what's going to help our constituents, like our patients the most, what's going to help people that are our customers the most as people that pay into United Healthcare, what's going to be the thing that's actually going to get them the most results, and then what's going to be the thing that's going to cost us as the company the least amount. And then how do we fast track all of that? So now you kind of know what we're looking at here.
Good afternoon. Like Catherine, we're going to use back pain to talk about what it is we are doing, not thinking about doing. Here's some data to establish context. If we look at back pain, non-surgical back pain, 30% start with PCP, 40% specialist, 31% chiro, PT, acu, OT. Total episode costs are to the right. The way to interpret that, blue is how much we spend with the first provider seen. So PCP, blue is how much did we spend with the PCP. Green is how much do we spend with other providers that practice with the first provider. And where this gets interesting is orange. When the patient leaves the first provider to go into the delivery system and get other services from other providers for the same episode of the same condition, what do we spend and who's seen? And the orange is where we see chiro and PT and acu stand out, meaning we make the investment in blue with chiro PT, the orange piece of the bar collapses pretty significantly from the other options. So that's where the total episode savings is occurring. And the dollars with the prevalence of back pain is real. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Below are the attributes of the episode, starting with these pathways. Number of different providers seen, fragmentation. How likely are you to receive recommended therapies? How likely are you to receive therapies the guidelines suggest you shouldn't be receiving? How likely are you to receive imaging and at what time in the episode? And in green, the pathway that's most aligned with all prevailing guidelines are when patients start with chiro, PT, acupuncture. Least fragmented, you receive the services you should, you avoid those that you shouldn't, imaging is aligned, total episode cost is lowest, that's attractive, yet only 30% of patients are starting with the ideal pathway. So what are we doing, like actually doing? And this is sort of our roadmap. And so if we start on the left, patient with back pain consults a variety of sources of information to decide what to do. They go down one of these three pathways: primary care, specialist, or conservative. There's the 30, 40, 30% front door. Our ambition, our goal is in 2 years is to take the front door access to conservative care from 30% north of 50%, and then timely referrals from those that self-select a medical path to take that from 2% north of 10%. And collectively, the actuaries have done the work. It's presented at the actuarial conference that net of the increased conservative costs on our commercial book, this will take out about $230 million in annual medical expenditures and reduce opiate prescribing for back pain by 25 to 26%. So our ambition is leveraging two parts of this journey, the front door and then the side door, referrals to conservative care. And what are we doing? In A, start with, it's come up multiple times, file 2019 and 2020 benefit plan designs to include waiving out-of-pocket costs, whether they be copays or deductibles for consumers that access conservative care options for back pain. Plans are filed, extraordinarily complex to make that work at the scale that we operate, but a lot of calories are being burnt to make that a possibility in 2019, 2020. Surrounding that, whether it's print, digital, portal, telephonic, a variety of almost public service communication efforts to help patients and employers become better consumers of care for spine-related disorders. Another key point, we're at yellow, we're not going to get through all this, it's kind of ambitious, but at B, at this point where patients are deciding, okay, I'm going to go into the delivery system, provide tools and resources that are simple to understand what's wrong with me. Do I have a red flag which I should escalate immediately? If not a red flag, what are my options? Present preferences and range of options for your preferences. Based on those preferences, who are the providers? Zip code, miles, minutes, gender, language capability, specialty, episode cost, that are sort of in your sort of set of preferences. Rack and stack those providers based on performance. We're connecting to practice management systems of these providers to see appointment availability in real time through their scheduling API layer to allow the patient to push a button, schedule with a provider that they choose to see, and ideally that'll be, in many cases, these conservative providers. So the point here is, I have no out-of-pocket cost. Here's the providers available to me that meet my preferences. Here's who has an appointment this afternoon or tomorrow. Push a button, done. And then for the medical paths, primary care and specialists port that same kind of technology into their workflows by embedding into Epic and Cerner so that the medical physician can know, no out-of-pocket, here's the PTs and chiros in the community, here's who's open this afternoon, push a button, refer, and connect the dots. So again, our ambition is really to drive up access to these conservative therapies by almost doubling the current rate. And I do have an appendix. I'll leave you with a picture. This is the current state of spine care today. So these same 27,000 providers we looked at yesterday, all of them were the first provider seen for 25 episodes of back pain. Here's the likelihood of receiving an opiate or an imaging study at any time during the episode. The color is the specialty. Spine care is almost a perfectly random event today. So how does a consumer have any idea who to see, what am I going to get, what's going to happen to me? And sitting here today with the guideline clarity, this is just frankly unacceptable. And so the call to action is really for us, no more research, no more data, just make this happen. So the urgency is there, the restlessness is there, the bias to action is there, and that's where we're squarely focused. So thanks for the time, I appreciate it.
Interesting, right? Like, it's interesting to see what the insurance companies are seeing and what they're seeing as viable, real options to take care of people that are having these types of problems, that are having problems with back pain. Specifically, did you notice he said back pain? We talked about 25, 26% of opioids are prescribed for back pain. That's why he's saying we need to just get that off the table. There's no reason for anybody to be doing that for the most part of prescribing any types of opioids. Those should be outliers whenever we're talking about something like back pain, because it's not actually correcting the problem. Again, it's the ears to block the noise from the engine. It's not fixing the problem. When I saw that, this was sent to me, and I just plugged it in because we talked. I said, hey, we're not going to have any video. I'll make sure not to have video. And then someone sent this to me. I was like, wait a minute. I have to put this in now, right? Because this is one of those things where you can see where it's going. Like in the next couple of years, if we can start trending, they're going to be educating the public. They're going to be educating and putting things out there. They're saying, we're just going to be doing this. Like, we just have to do this in order to let people know. Like, when you saw that splot chart that looks like it should be a linear chart. That should be like, all right, they go from here to here to here to here to get the care that they need in order to make that happen. But it's everywhere. It just depends on what provider they go to. So my thing that I'm looking at from you and from doing this is not only just to educate, to understand like what's the history, what's going on, what does that mean locally for us here in Louisiana? What does it mean that why is it? Like, I want people to know these drug companies, they are lying to other providers about this information. Like, they're flat out lying. They're making up their own numbers. They're making up their own things. They're citing things that aren't even true in order to get providers to understand, like, hey, they're not going to be addicted to this. It's okay, right? Like, it's not a problem. And we can fix all these other things. But that's not true either. Like I said, it has its place, but its place is very narrow and very limited, as opposed to as many people are dying each and every day with this. So I want to thank y'all. Thank you for having me here. I really appreciate you having me. I look at this stuff as it's not just about us knowing this information and learning something new here and that kind of thing. It's about what we do with it. And the more that we can take this information and share it with other people and get it out there with other people, that's why I was so like, yes, record this. I want other people to know. I want people to know what's going on because it's important. And there is no better time than right now to let people know. With the number of people that are dying each and every day, the number of families that are being destroyed, the number of babies that are being born, the number of kids that are going in, I didn't even touch on this, the number of kids that are going into foster care because of their parents being addicted to opioids. And a lot of times, like I said, they're being prescribed those opioids the right way. Like, you got pain? Take this, right? Because of what passed through the FDA. And they're just like, yeah, here, take this. And then they're getting addicted because they're one of that 26% that instantly gets addicted on their first try. And boom, that's it. It's not their fault. And we've got to help people understand the consequences that go along with that, because the consequences are real. And the more that we can get this information out there, the more people that we can help, the more lives that we can save. And I'm just proud that y'all are part of that too. So thank y'all for being here, and thank you for having me share. Thank you.